Hello everyone, I'm Laura Boyd and welcome again to Beatson Talks, our podcast with inspirational people who are in touch with Beatson Cancer Charity. And today we are talking to somebody who knows it very well. Martin Cawley is the former CEO of the charity and began his time with the Beatson back in 2019. Martin, welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Tell me a bit about how you got involved at the start and your journey with the charity.
Well, my career goes back a long way. I'm a nurse by profession, so the early part of my career I worked in the NHS for about 11 years, predominantly in learning disability and mental health services. And I just found that working in the NHS, I felt that sometimes you didn't have the freedom to deliver some of the supports that you would like to. So I decided to leave and I joined Quarriers, the voluntary sector agency, and in many ways it felt quite liberating, and I found a place where I think the values of the organisation aligned very closely with my own, very much driven by person-centred principles, by promoting people's dignity, by looking at where you could build supports around people that was as individualised as possible. But Quarriers were quite a long-established agency. So I stayed there for about 17 years and I learned a massive amount during that time because it was about a whole period of organisational change. And it was at a point in my life where I was just going through my early 20s and into my 30s. And like most of us, my life was touched by my family members being affected by cancer. And I remember at that time in my early 20s thinking that there is something about the dignity and respect that people deserve while they're going through that journey. Although that must just have stuck in the back of my head there. And I was then chief executive of an organisation called Turning Point Scotland to provide support for people with learning disabilities, mental health problems, people with drug and alcohol issues. And again, had a wonderful time there, really pioneering services, developing new things, new models that were really pushing the boundaries forward of supporting people in really innovative ways. And after that, actually, I spent a few years at the National Lottery Community Fund, which is where you give grants to organisations.
That must be a nice job.
It was brilliant. Yeah. I mean, it was fantastic. We were giving away £90 million every single year to voluntary sector agencies and third sector agencies, community organisations, doing a whole plethora of stuff. There's one thing giving money to other people to make the magic happen. It's different when you're a step removed, and I missed that. I miss being close to the action, and I miss being actually part of the organisation that makes the difference rather than the organisation that funded the organisation that makes a difference. And then this association in my mind kept coming back to me about having that empathy with cancer. And Beatson Cancer Charity were looking to recruit a new chief executive. Thought about it long and hard, threw my hat in the ring, and I was very fortunate to get offered the job. So those two things from an early point in my career and then just at the latter part of my career just sort of merged at the right time, I think.
And it can't be an easy task because something like the Beatson, it means something to everyone because everyone in Scotland's life is touched by everywhere's life is touched by cancer. But the Beatson is such a beacon within that community. I mean, it's no mean feat to head up that charity. What was it like stepping into that office and into that world?
Well, everyone knows the Beatson, as you said, Laura. It's a sort of iconic institution, I think, in the west of Scotland, if not the whole of Scotland.
Yeah.
It's got a reputation that's synonymous with quality. When you hear the word the Beatson, you start thinking about intimacy and quality of service and all those sorts of things and attributes that you would like to associate yourself with.
Yeah.
And that's why I threw my hat in the ring and as I say, fortunate enough to get offered the job. I think it's starting, what occurred to me, I think, quite quickly was that, and I probably knew this before I went in, to be honest, but the organisation I felt had so much potential, but didn't quite have the infrastructure and support mechanisms in place to maybe realise its potential.
Yeah.
But also it was underpinned by having such a large community of followers, from individuals to families to organisations to corporate bodies, to having a reputation nationally, in its proximity to policy in terms of Scottish Government policy. And I thought what needed done at that time was maybe trying to focus the strategic intent behind that and pulling those threads together. Its brand was so strong, but its brand could only take it so far. And I felt that the biggest task, I think, was to align everyone who was part of that community or wanted to be part of that community. I see it as a community movement, to be honest with you. Align everybody around a single vision of what that could be like, I feel like. Maybe a single cause, and maybe an identity that it had the potential to have, but didn't really, I felt, didn't have at that time.
Yeah.
So those were the sort of motivators.
And it is something that so many people get involved with, as you say, from a volunteering side.
Yep.
I think the events I've done and the events you've been at, that is what's wonderful about it, is the communities that come together. It's not just the individuals, it's not just the families, it's the people from the surrounding.
You do every year.
I've done it every year, but it's the people you meet that are so passionate about that charity. Is that a lovely side of working?
It's phenomenal. I mean, I've said this before, but it's the smallest organisation I've worked for a big part of my career in terms of its scale. But it's the most accountable I've ever felt. And I think that's because of the reason why people want to be part of it, and where the money comes from. The money comes from people like you and me and so many thousand other people, thousands of other people who, and their attachment to it becomes from an emotional place, not a logical one.
Yeah.
And it's because they understand what it feels like to have a loved one. Maybe they themselves, it might be a mum and dad, it might be a brother and sister. God forbid, it might even be a child. I often say that, but these are the reasons why people feel motivated to give money to this organisation. And for me, that builds a greater accountability, or a higher degree of accountability that you should never underestimate. In fact, you should always use as your litmus test and your benchmark. It should be the thing that you think about every time you make an investment or a big decision. It should be the factor that motivates you when you talk to your staff about what you want them to do or what you're trying to achieve in the next period of time. And so these things become the underpinning factors that create the energy for the organisation, but also create the drive and vision for helping you take it to a different direction.
And I think when you're first diagnosed with cancer, or somebody in your family is, your immediate thoughts, obviously, the treatment, but you don't necessarily think about everything that goes with that, from the small things like a cup of tea to the counselling to me, I originally thought these were all things that would be provided by the NHS. I just thought, this is the hospital, everything's encompassed. But you very quickly realise that no, that comes from the likes of the Beatson Cancer Charity. And I think that's what drives people, because they see that tangible benefit, or where their money goes.
You'll often hear us use the term about adding to the margin of excellence that the Beatson Hospital can offer, but it can only offer so much, and it can't go those extra miles. It can't do the things that just make it so much more personal, or so much more intimate, or have so much more added value. And I think that's where the charity excels, I think. And when you're in the outside looking in, you can actually see where you can make a contribution that can enhance that even further. I'm delighted to say we've got such a strong relationship with our colleagues in the NHS. And if we didn't have that, would be nothing. We carry their name, so we have to be, our activities have to underpin the things that improve the ability for them to deliver supports for people with cancer. You said something there that made me think about that moment of diagnosis. I think we all go through life, I think, enjoying things, and we have positive experiences in life where that builds up and adds to a reservoir of resilience. And then all of a sudden, bam, you get a diagnosis of cancer, and you start to worry about all those things that you take for granted often in life. When am I going to be able to work again? How am I going to look after my kids? Where's my income going to come from? Am I going to be able to continue to live in this house? What's my mortality going to look like? How's my relationships going to go? How am I going to tell my family about this? All these things become factors that get to the very forefront of your mind rather than sit at the back of your mind. And I see a lot of the work that we do, and at that point, I think that's where your reservoir of resilience starts to get drained a wee bit, because you draw on it.
Yeah.
And often you can go through life and not have to draw on that, but at that moment you start drawing on it. And I think what we feel our motivation is trying to support people in a way and as dignified and as personalised a way as possible that helps top that tank of resilience up again. So it's maybe as it's getting drained at one end, we're trying to top it up at the other end. But the only way you can do that is by treating people in an individual way, recognising and understanding the issues that they're going through, both psychologically, physiologically, and their relationships, and find moments and times where you can make an intervention that just helps that person take a more positive step, and reboost the hope that they have that they're going to get through this, and come out the other side stronger.
And one thing I think is so lovely about this charity is that it's not just the people directly involved. As I said, the families get so involved. And even after the most horrendous thing can happen and you lose that person going through cancer, there are so many families and people who continue to volunteer with the charity. Some go on to work for the charity, don't they? And they all, without sounding like a cliche, it does become the Beatson family, the Beatson Cancer Charity family. It does feel like that.
It's difficult to describe it in any other way. I know exactly what you mean. You host off the Beatson track for us every year.
Yeah.
You know what it's like when you look out and you see everyone in the yellow T-shirts. Oh. It's one of the most heartwarming feelings that you'll get.
Yeah.
And the majority of people that are there are family members and friends of the focus person. Mm-hmm. The person with cancer may well be there themselves, but the majority of people round about that are all those other people, and they're there because they care.
Yeah.
And when they care, when you find that caring attitude, you find a compassionate attitude, and then people just want to rally around and be supportive.
Yeah.
And because of the organisation and charity that we are, that emotional attachment can become even stronger because they feel part of something bigger.
Yeah.
And when you work for the charity, and that's such a unique and special experience, and it's actually a privilege. And you should, again, I said it earlier, you can never underestimate these things. You know, you do that at your peril. In fact, you use it to your advantage because you portray all that back to the people who are part of that community, and it reinforces it all.
Yeah.
It just keeps it going, and it's just quite a phenomenon.
And there's something quite special, I think, about at that time when you feel most helpless, being able to give something back to an organisation that you know helps so many other people in the same boat. You know, I remember immediately feeling like, I need to do something. I need to raise money, or, you know, for family to get involved in that too. And I think, you know, that relationship, they all become involved, and there's a comfort in that and a drive that it gives you when you're going through that really difficult time. That's
Somebody's
so important.
going to pull me up for this, but I think we've got about 460 odd people who volunteer for us just now.
Yeah.
Might be 470, might be 440, might be but it's around
in the 400s.
Yes. 400 and odd people. Do you know that's huge? We've got about 83 staff, and 460 odd volunteers.
It's amazing.
Every single person that comes into contact with us, often people that will show around the hospital, will talk about the services we provide, and they all do exactly what you said. They all say, what can I do? Mm-hmm. How can I help? And our job in many ways is trying to harness that, embrace that, and channel it in a way that makes this community even bigger and better than it was the day before the person said, can I do something for you? And that's sometimes a financial contribution, often not. But out those 460 odd people, they will donate countless hours that will equate to hundreds of thousands of pounds every single year. Mm-hmm. And they're doing it out of the goodness of their heart, and they're doing it because they know what it feels like. Because they've either been through that journey themselves, or they've got a loved one that's been through it. And as you say, sometimes it's maybe a sad ending to that cancer experience, but it does not diminish their motivation by any manner of means at all.
It's so true. I want a shift on that tea and biscuit trolley, right? Sign me up. I've always wanted to do.
My God, there's a queue in front of you.
Is there? Oh no, gutted. I've always wanted to do that. You must have seen so many amazing stories, so many heartbreaking stories, but can you pick a couple of highlights of your career? What have been those standout moments?
Difficult. It is difficult because there are so many that I think I can think of big projects that we've worked on where a couple of years ago we raised about 3.75 million for a new MRI scanner, which was the first of its kind in the country, that makes radiotherapy planning and the delivery of radiotherapy much more precise, much more specific, and much more accurate to the tumour, even when it changes. So that would be one highlight for a project that we've achieved, or a thing that we've done. I think navigating and steering a pathway through COVID was a challenge.
And you just came in right at the
just
start
before
of that,
it, yeah. I mean, I remember thinking and feeling such an overwhelming sense of responsibility at that time to be the custodian, if you like, or me and my colleagues, the custodians of this organisation that was so treasured in people's hearts, and then think about how are we going to steer this through this uncertain waters that none of us had experienced before. So we were no different from any other organisation in that respect. But do you know what we did? We actually used that as a strength. We used that community of people and decided on day one to continue to engage with them very proactively. So we pushed our communications team were phenomenal during that time, pushing out our marketing material, pushing out our potential income generating fundraising activities, pushing out the impact they have and touching people's lives. And I think that kept us very close in people's minds at a time where other organisations weren't doing that. And very quickly we looked for ways in which we could continue to engage people to fundraise for us and with us in different ways that didn't involve the mass participation events that we were all used to. So going from that trepidation and nervousness and feeling of uncertainty, then feeling quite excited by the prospect of that, and then really enthused when we were successful in some of these things, and then thinking, my God, we're going to come out of this the other side so much stronger. And I actually think that's what's happened. So that's a highlight. Having such wonderful, skilled colleagues over that period of time just has brought the organisation so much more to life. And people who are as committed as the person that sits next to them, driven by a shared set of values and a shared set of principles, and never really deviating away from that. You know, people have moved on and developed their careers over the years, but as someone said to me recently, you never really leave the Beatson Cancer Charity, you know, it sort of stays in your heart there. That would be achievement. The volunteer network that I talked about, my God, we wouldn't be a fraction of the organisation that we are without having that army of, the yellow army of volunteers. I guess maybe the thing that threads throughout the whole of that, I think, is the engagement and interaction of all those people who've been through that cancer experience during that time. I said earlier about how not feeling as accountable in previous jobs. And it's because I think we've never deviated from trying to treat people with the respect, dignity and intimacy they deserve. And trying to make sure that they feel as supported to build their strength as much as they can. And you don't take that responsibility lightly.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, but is there anything anyone's ever said to you about what the charity has meant to them or how they've helped with them that's particularly stuck with you?
Every other day people say that, you know, the Wellbeing Centre, you've been in the Wellbeing Centre, it's Wellbeing Centre is this sort of oasis of calm and in the midst of a hospital.
It doesn't feel like you're in the hospital.
It's a sanctuary. I describe it as it's a place to remind people who they are rather than what they've got. You know, they're there to be who they are and not there because they're a patient with cancer. And I think that's reinforced by everyone that shares in that experience with them, whether it's a staff member, a volunteer or a fellow service user. They all seem to get it right away. But I remember walking in there one day and a man said to me, I'd sort of introduced myself, and he said, "Oh, no, I think I know who you are." And I said, "Well, why is that?" He says, the staff keep saying, "That Martin Cawley over the road." And I'm saying, "Well, who's this Martin Cawley over the road?"
You're notorious.
I know. Do you know what it was? It was because he had heard that we need to stay focused on the thing that's important to the patients. So it's not about whether you're this chief executive of this organisation that says it, whether you're a volunteer that says it. the words that are said become the most important.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter who's representing this charity. That felt to me as though we're all representing in a way that is consistent, that the message is clear and that the message is heard. And I think that for me sort of made me feel quite good.
And I'm sure that will carry on as the charity moves forward.
I'm sure, no doubt.
You've stepped down as CEO, but will it stay with you and will you stay involved?
100%. I'm handing over to a real strong leader. Gillian has been with me on this journey for the last 5 years also, Gillian Hailstones, who takes over as Chief Exec. There is nobody in the third sector in Scotland, in my mind, in the field of cancer that has as good a knowledge as Gillian, that is as well connected, that has
amazing.
Such strong values.
She's just brilliant.
She's fantastic. And I think so we're certainly leaving the organisation in really safe hands. But what Gillian has is that army of supporters, people that want to feel part of and connected to and associated with this organisation, and that's the thing that will give her the strength, and give my colleagues and my ex-colleagues the strength to continue on the journey and make us as good as we can possibly be.
What are your hopes for the charity going forward?
That it continues to fulfil its ambitions, that it continues to support people in ways, that, as I've said, that make them feel better, a bit more equipped to deal with their cancer experience, that continues to innovate and influence where it can. We talked about Gillian there a minute ago. Gillian's really well connected with the Scottish Government. So I think even being a modest charity, we've got such significant reach and significant influence, and I think it'd be wise of us to continue to try and develop that and take advantage of that. But the charity would be nothing without the people that use its service and without the people that help fund its services. I mean, we will fund some amazing projects, research projects that might lead to a cure or a better treatment in cancer care. But the real motivation for trying to do that is because we know that somebody's experienced what that felt like.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that I don't think Gillian or any one of us would ever let us take our eye off the ball.
No, I think you're handing over to a strong woman there, and
Indeed,
it's going to be brilliant. But you've done an amazing job,
Thank you
and
very
you've
much.
been a big presence and a big part of the charity, and I know that will continue, and so many people are very grateful. So
appreciate
thank
that
you
very
for
much,
that.
Laura.
Look forward to seeing you at all the events.
I can't wait.
In the
Yeah, being there on the other side and enjoy it for a change.
That'll be brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much. And thank you as well for listening. If you would like to support or be supported by the Beatson Cancer Charity, then you can visit beatsoncancercharity.org.